What do you think here on Sinjun? All good?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
Cool. So I guess this will be our first community call on DAO Punks, which is cool. And it's probably long overdue, but we've been working on a lot of stuff and there's been a lot of things going on. So I think we've just been busy kind of keeping our heads down and building. But I'm glad we could get people here together. And it's definitely an intimate group. But what I think is cool is that a lot of the people here, obviously I recognize and see around a lot. So first of all, thank you guys for participating. Thanks for being here. And thanks for just being like in DAO Punk's community in general. Because obviously, anything on Web3, without the community, you really have nothing. So that's kind of first and foremost. There really is no structure for today's call. It's kind of like we just wanted to just get people together. I know kind of one thing is that there's so much going on in this space on a daily basis and it changes so fast. And I totally get it that there's a lot of people that just have like limited bandwidth between their IRL stuff and Web3 stuff. And so sometimes it's hard for some of you guys to kind of attend certain calls or be active in certain things. And so really we wanted to use this as like a way to kind of update and kind of give you our perspective on kind of how things are going. And, one of the reasons too that we held this in like the community voice channel is because we want you guys to have the ability to talk. So feel free to like jump in and ask questions or put input into anything that we talk about if you're involved in it. I don't want to be talking the whole time, so that would be great. I guess really the first thing we could start with is kind of the progress since Mint. I think we're coming on like 6 months now, maybe close to that. So we've really, there's been a lot of stuff that's happened since the Mint. And sometimes when you're kind of going through the daily things, at least to me, it doesn't feel like there's been a ton of stuff happening. But then when I zoom out and I kind of look at all the stuff that we've done so far, I can definitely see how, we've done a lot. We've accomplished a lot of stuff. And really, if you look at our roadmap, we've already accomplished some of the bigger pieces on the roadmap as well, which is cool. And so really, I'll just run through some of those things. So since the Mint, we did raise, we wanted to raise 19 ETH for the grants. We did end up raising 19 ETH for those grants, and that is sitting in our DAO Punk treasury right now. It's really just been sitting there waiting for us to finish this grants program. But I will talk more on that in a little bit. We also wanted to do the 1-of-1 shirts. That was a really big undertaking, and I'm super proud that we were able to get that done. I mean, definitely there's a couple people in this community that it wouldn't have been possible without. And really those people are Sinjun, Carl Sheriff, and our developers. It was definitely one of those kind of things where you look at the concept of printing 1-of-1 shirts, and that concept has been around for a long time. But when you try to merge it into the Web3 world, and you try to merge it in with like MetaMask and Shopify, and you're trying to, merge legacy systems with new systems, it definitely created an interesting problem. But we were able to figure it out, which was really cool. And I think we were one of the first, if not the first project to do 1-of-1 shirts like this in such a large collection. And I still don't think any other projects have done it either yet. We've had a lot of people reach out to us. They're super interested in how we did it and wanted to know the whole steps and process. And so actually next week, Sinjun and Hiro and I, we're going to be flying over to Los Angeles, and we're going to be meeting with our printer face to face. And we're actually going to be putting together like a little kind of like documentary, a little mini documentary, kind of explaining the whole process, like how we did the shirt claim, how the whole process went, kind of some of the problems that we ran into and some of the stuff we had to overcome. And really the intention of doing this little video is like, and this is kind of coming out of Sinjun's mouth, but we come from this like Web 2 world where everybody wants to hold all their cards like really close to their chest, and they don't really want to like divulge anything because they want like a competitive advantage or they want to hold industry secrets and stuff like that, right? And so really we don't want to do that. I mean, the whole concept of DAOs is all about community. It's all about inclusivity. It's all about kind of spreading information. Like, I think the whole open source ethos vibes really well with DAOs. And so we really want to put together this little explainer that just breaks down the whole process, like just drops the veil and says like, hey, here's exactly how we did it. And really what we're hoping by doing that is we're hoping that other projects kind of pick up this mentality of spreading like culture in real life, like this metaversal culture, this Web3 culture. And we want to help give them the tools to do that. And so really, we want to hope that in the future, there's a bunch of other really cool protocols and projects at like ETH Denver and all these different crypto conferences walking around with their really cool merch, and maybe they can pay tributes back to kind of DAO punks for being the first kind of people who cracked the code and kind of gave them the roadmap on how to do that. And so that's kind of cool. So that was the one-of-one shirts, and that was a big undertaking. I mean, it really took a lot from our team. I think, I don't know the exact number of shirts that we've shipped. I want to say it's like 400, maybe right under 400. And we've shipped to 47 different countries, spanning 6 of the 7 continents, which is super cool. And really, that was kind of a new thing for me. I don't know if any of you guys have ever worked in like logistics before, and you've sent stuff all around the world. It definitely creates some really interesting issues. So that's something that I learned firsthand myself. I kind of thought that once we figured out the whole shirt claim process, that the shipping part would be easy, but it definitely isn't. So if you guys are if anybody here is still waiting on their one-of-one shirt, it is probably in the mail, and we're actively kind of watching with different shippers and all of our different providers and making sure that stuff kind of works its way to the end goal. So that was the shirts. The other thing that was big on our roadmap, and really we didn't have like an answer to how this would go, was this whole like DAO to DAO collaboration. And so we knew that there would be a lot of DAOs that would kind of show themselves, and they would want to work with DAO punks in some capacity. And so we didn't really think that would happen right away, but it ended up happening pretty quickly after the mint. We had 2 DAOs approach us, specifically City DAO and Aragon DAO. And they really wanted to just show support for the project. They really loved the idea of giving grants to the Web3 community and funding people. And so they wanted to help fund the treasury in some way. And so we originally talked with them about doing like one-on-one art collabs for them. And so some of you guys have probably seen those. We released the City DAO piece, and that turned out really great. That was a collaboration between Sinjun and I. And then we actually just released the Aragon piece not long ago as well. We're still waiting to see how Aragon wants to roll it out to their community, but they have a community of like 100,000 followers on Twitter, and they've been around for a long time. They're kind of known pretty well in the DAO space. So we think that's really cool. They haven't released it yet to their community, so we haven't really seen any of the social benefits from that yet. But really, we're trying to figure out as we go, what these DAO collaborations look like. Like right now, they've just been kind of a simple kind of exchange. You give us ETH for custom one-of-one art, and we'll take that ETH and funnel it into the treasury. But we wanted to go much further than that, and so we're talking with City DAO, and we're talking with Aragon DAO about some potential ways to potentially lift up their community and also lift up our community, and then hopefully in turn lift up the whole like Web3 ecosystem. And so, we'll talk some more about this a little bit later, but really that kind of revolves around this idea of like a DAO job board, or job placements, or basically how do we provide work opportunities for people that are interested in working in Web3? Because we all know that like DAOs need people and they need workers, and we all know that a lot of us need money too. And so we're trying to figure out how we can bridge that gap and make it work kind of for both the DAOs that we work with and DAO punks community in general. So that is the DAO to DAO collaborations. We are also in talks with another DAO. We're talking with Sobel, which is B.Pete's, is heavily involved over at Sobel. I think he's on their core team. So Sobel is super cool. If you guys went to ETH Denver, you probably saw a talk with Sobel. They're making this really cool tool that is going to be super useful for DAOs. they have potential to kind of be injected into a lot of DAOs because the tool that they're building is really useful. So that would be a super cool collaboration as well. And they're kind of intending on using the DAO punk that we create for them, like front and center on all of their marketing and all their collateral and everything like that. So it really could be another great place to really kind of push the DAO punk narrative along. And again, drive attention back to our community, which is really what we want to do in the end of the day. So that is the DAO to DAO collaborations.
CB, just one thing. What was the name of the last DAO you mentioned?
It's called Sobel, so it's Sobol. Yeah, and I mean, Hiro, maybe you can explain a little better. Like, do you have like a little like one sentence explanation of what that tool is?
Yeah, sure. It's like DAO Cartrography. So the idea is you get to see, where you hang out in DAOs and how it overlaps with other DAO contributors. So it works like on a DAO level, but also on a guild-wide level, and it shows you relationships between you and other DAO contributors. Essentially, it sort of looks like the coordinate allocate map. If you ever looked at that, and it shows this, like essentially a map of who you are hanging out with and doing work with.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
so it's a super cool tool. We're definitely excited to be working with them, and they're super stoked too. So really, it's kind of interesting because again, they're launching their tool soon, and I think they have like a beta tool or something like that you guys can look at. But they're really planning on using, our DAO punk branding that like we create for them as basically like their brand. So it's pretty cool opportunity, and I mean, that's kind of already happened as well with like CityDAO. Like CityDAO is a pretty well-known DAO. I mean, even Vitalik Buterin was talking about it in one of his blogs. And, one thing that CityDAO was lacking was really like an artistic like vision of like what this DAO is. And so really that's like what we gave them. We gave them something that like their community could kind of get behind. And they've started using that DAO punk as like, front and center on their marketing. Like, they've been shipping it on like the header of their newsletters, and they have it even as their banner profile picture now inside of their Discord server. And I even think they're working on like integrating it onto the front page of their website. So it's cool. I mean, if we can continue to create these cool relationships with DAOs, and we can kind of be front and center, there's a lot of ways we can get benefits from that. And so we're still trying to figure that out though. And so really, like, if any of you guys have any cool ideas for how we can integrate with DAOs better, services that we could provide them or that they could provide us, always be thinking about stuff like that, because we have a pretty strong group of people over here, and we have to just figure out, what we can meaningfully do. And so that's something that we're always trying to figure out. So let's see. So obviously you guys know about the tie-dye hoodies. That was really like our first drop that came that wasn't related to the one-of-one shirts. So that was super cool. That was a big moment for us too, because really, one thing that we recognized kind of in the very beginning, or I think what Sinjun's recognized, is that this space, like Web3 in general, is really filled with a bunch of like very smart and very like influential people they're builders. They're building all these like crazy cool technologies. They're building all these like world-changing innovations. But one thing that's lacking is really style and fashion. And I know some people think that that's, maybe sometimes silly, but in the end of the day, like, it's a part of culture. Like, fashion is a very big part of culture, and it's how we like show our affiliation to a community or our tribe, like whatever you want to call it. And so I'm sure if you guys were at like ETH Denver, you probably saw like a lot of DAO punks out there rocking their DAO shirts. You probably saw a bunch of other people that were rocking like other protocols and stuff like that. Like, that's how like we spread culture in the meat space. And so we want to continually push the envelope and just provide really cool stuff that not only looks good, but also like spreads the message out into the real world. Because it's a continual thing. Like, we can't just be in an echo chamber by ourselves on Twitter and Discord. Like, we still have to go out into the world and talk to people and talk to our friends and stuff like that. And so we're always going to be trying to think about stuff like that and just try to provide really cool fashion that we can wear at like different events, and just cool things that we can provide. We've also talked with like CityDAO and Aragon DAO about potentially doing some merch for them, which would basically be like a DAO Punk, like co-branded sort of vibe. And what's cool about that is really if like, let's say we work with CityDAO on like a collaboration on some merch, like let's just use a t-shirt as an example. Really what's cool about that is, you know, we make a shirt that's for CityDAO. It's like, it's very like made for their community, and we would be co-branded on that with them. And so basically we don't have to convince, you know, all these people why they should be rocking DAO Punks. They just have to be convinced that they want to wear CityDAO stuff. And so really, like, again, if we're at like different conventions or you're in the real world, you could potentially be seeing a lot more like DAO Punk ethos kind of running around the ecosystem. And so it kind of goes back to our main thought. Like, really, if we want the DAO Punk vibe to survive, it really has to become a thing where, you know, if you are in a DAO or you're a full-time worker in a DAO, then you're basically considered a DAO Punk. And I extend that much further than like holding a DAO Punk NFT. Like, I think of it as a very like inclusive thing to where, you know, we want this to be like a mainstream sort of vibe. And so that's continually what we're trying to work towards. Let's see what we have here. So yeah, so really, I mean, again, at ETH Denver, there was a bunch of, you know, it was an awesome show out by the DAO Punks. It was super cool seeing all the pictures. You know, I think, again, it speaks back to like, you know, people want cool stuff to wear. Like, it's really as simple as that. And I think, you know, over at ETH Denver, we saw that happen. Like, you know, there's lots of people that we don't see hanging out in the DAO Punks Discord. We don't see them interacting with DAO Punks like every day, like some people. But when these people had the opportunity to rep DAO Punks like on stage at ETH Denver or DAO Denver, like they were. And so I think that that's super cool. Like, that again just shows that like, just because you're not, you know, involved intimately in DAO Punks every single day, or, you know, you can't keep up all the time, it doesn't mean that you're still not like a strong, you know, believer in the community, or you're a strong supporter. Like, you absolutely still are. And so I think that's really cool as well. And I noticed a lot of that happening. And so, yeah, if you guys, by the way, if you guys in the wild see like any videos or interviews with people wearing DAO Punk shirts and stuff like that, just shoot it in our Discord or something like that, or tag the DAO Punks Twitter on Twitter, and I'll just keep spreading that stuff around, because I know there were a lot of interviews where people were wearing shirts. So that would be super cool. So another thing that we were working heavily on and is still in the works is this grants program. It's really this how to DAO Punk grants. And that's been something that we've been working towards since really the very beginning. I mean, really since the first week of Mint, we have been working towards figuring out, you know, what does the grant program look like? How does it work? You know, what processes and procedures do we need in place to make it work correctly? And it's really gone through a lot of iterations. And I think we've all learned, you know, different things throughout the process. I mean, I think a lot of people are starting to realize that, like, if you're running a DAO or you're running a community, you know, as a pseudo DAO, things take a lot longer to do, because there's a lot of people, you know, a lot of people have different opinions. A lot of people kind of see things working differently than others. And so really that kind of seemed to happen in the first probably couple months of these conversations around grants. That's really where we probably saw the most evolution of this grants framework. We had one DAO Punk in particular, B.Pete's, who really kind of set up the foundation for us and like got the conversation like heavily started, and we appreciate him for that. But there's definitely been some other people that have kind of taken the reins from that point and are starting to push it even further. And so really the update on the grants is we noticed a need for, I guess if I back up, initially we thought maybe naively that maybe we could come to some sort of group consensus on how the grants program could work, and just keep kind of running it as like a working group model. And we started to see some issues with that. I mean, in the DAO space especially, you have some people that start like very interested and very engaged and then drop off for whatever reason. And I totally get it. You know, the real life gets in the way, maybe personal things, you know, whatever. And that's what's cool about DAOs is like you're not an employee, so you can decide to work when you want and not work when you don't. But unfortunately, when you're trying to put together something as big as a grants program, you really do need a couple people that really are accountable for it, and people that you can rely on to get things done. So really, we noticed in the past couple weeks that the grants program is like, it's solid in theory. Like, we have a really good kind of theory on how it should work, but we needed to kind of get more granular and figure out, okay, like, what are the actual logistics of how it's going to work? And sometimes those little logistics are things that maybe a couple people really should be figuring out in the beginning. And so what we're doing is we actually decided to elect 3 DAO punks, and it's basically a paid position for them to champion the grants program and basically get this handbook written. And so what's going to happen is we basically elected Stubbs, mycoBici, and GarrotTheParrot. And so really those 3 people they've been around since pretty much day one, and they've been very active, and they showed strong interest in wanting to like see this grants program through. And actually one of them has worked on grants programs before in the past, which is cool. I think that's Stubbs. And so really they are championing this grants program. And I guess the best way to think about it is, once they're done doing what they're doing, they're basically going to have this handbook put together on how to give grants all the way down to the granular level of like what happens, each week, how do we disperse funds, everything. And this handbook can then basically just be passed off to kind of any community member that wants to take the lead in the future on giving grants. And what's cool about it too is, going back to what I was saying earlier, we're not going to hold the cards close to our chest either. And so we're going to basically release this grants program out into the wild as well. So if somebody wants to come over and fork our grants program and use it for something else, like, they absolutely can. And they're going to have kind of a framework already put together, which is cool. So that is going to be super exciting. We've been working with Stubbs, mycoBici, and GarrotTheParrot for I think the past like 2 weeks now. We took a break for ETH Denver because a lot of them were there, but we're moving full steam on that, and they have a timeline put together. So if you guys want to see what their timeline looks like, I think they've posted some of that stuff in the grants channel. And if not, you can just look in the announcements, and there's going to be a document in there that has like some timelines and some deliverables and stuff like that. So that's super cool. So I know we've been saying, grants program soon. It really is soon. So we're really just kind of trying to make sure that the first one works really well, because that kind of leads me into like the future of DAO punks and really, where I kind of see it. And again, like, this community is not just me or Hiro or Sinjun or other people. It's really everybody. And so, if you have a vision for how something should be, then definitely feel free to speak up. But the way that I see it is, really, this grants program it's really important that the first few grants go well, which is why we've been really going slow and steady and trying to make sure that this works good, because, we have a treasury of like 19 ETH right now for grants. Plus we fundraised some more money from the DAO collaborations, I think like 4.5 more ETH. So we have some ETH, and we all know that this ETH isn't going to last forever, right? If we give these grants out, then obviously we're going to be cash flow negative while we're giving grants out. So we have to find ways to get more income, essentially, for the grants program. I really don't think we're going to have a hard time finding DAOs, finding initiatives, and finding people that want to lift up the DAO ecosystem and fund meaningful projects like DAO punks. But we have to first prove that like we can effectively give out grants and we can do it, successfully. And so really, I think right now we've been hesitant to like pursue other avenues to get more grant money, because it's hard. It's a hard ask to go and ask for money from people when you don't have really a working product just yet. And so we do have a couple ideas on like places that we could go and potentially get more money to fund this grant program. But really, we have to make sure that the grant program works the way that we want it to work and the way that we think it can work. And so really, I want to put us in a position to where, we sink or swim. And that's, we have to get to that point eventually. And by all means, I think we're going to swim just fine. So, but once we figure that part out, and we can show effectively that like we have maybe 2 or 3 grant rounds behind us, there are definitely some places that we can approach and potentially get some more grant money. And then we can start to really figure out some creative fun stuff. Like the whole intention of this DAO kind of from the get-go was to provide grants, right? And to lift up the DAO ecosystem. Well, once we can stop conversations about, how do we give these grants away, we can start conversations about how do we get more money so we can continue to give these grants away. And I think those conversations are going to be really exciting, but you can't put the cart before the horse. And so really we have to focus on, giving away the first round of grants. And so that has been the absolute biggest focus on everything right now. So if any of you guys are at all like interested in the grants program, if you're interested in even receiving grants, like definitely try to jump on some of our grant calls, because really we want to talk to you and we want to figure out, what do you think? How do you think some stuff should go? Because really this is, we want as much community input as possible. If we don't, if you don't give input, that's fine too, because we have people in place that are going to get this program done regardless. But, the more people that we get some input from, probably the stronger it's going to be. So really, if you have any interest at all, jump into the grants channel or jump into one of the grants calls. Every single meeting that we have on DAO Punks is completely inclusive. Like even right now, this call is in a public channel. Like anybody that joins the Discord can jump in this call right now. This is where all the calls are. So even if you have any friends that are interested, they don't have to be DAO Punk holders to join any of the conversations. It's really anybody's able to talk. So yes, absolutely.
And they can seek help from all of the different perspectives in the DAO sphere that are present in the DAO Punk community. And there's like a rich and robust spectrum of experience that's represented here. And all it takes is for those who are interested to like be present in the DAO Punks Discord server and check out those channels and kind of be there for folks to lend a hand when they need some help. The other thing is like we're gonna have our AMAs with the grantees to check in on their progress. So that's another point of participation for the community. Right now, I've posted a list of the questions that we're going to be putting on the grant application in the grants channel. So for everybody, if y'all want to go check out that doc, you can make comments on the doc, or you can make comments directly in the grants channel on, or even if you don't want to read that doc, at least just kind of put some things that you think should be included on the application, or if you have any issue with any of the questions that are on there. Some community feedback would be great. We've pretty much refined it to where we think that it should be at this point already, but we wanted to get some feedback from the community. Another role that's going to come up is that when we receive all of the applications, we're going to need to screen them and handpick about 20 of them. We haven't decided on the exact number that we're going to put up for community vote. So if anybody wants to be on that screening board, and you have any interest in that, you can throw your hand up in the community voice chat or in the grants channel. And we'll be in touch once we're ready for that. We're also going to do a coordinate round partway through cohort 0 to check in on people's progress and have a little bit of accountability for if people are actually using the funds to do what they said they were going to do, and or whether they've just rugged us. So we're going to distribute the second half of the grants through a coordinate round that will be determined by the DAO Punks community. And then the other thing is obviously voting on the grantees themselves. So there's going to be a lot of exciting stuff coming up. And just keep your eyes peeled for opportunities to get involved. But I think 2 specific roles that I would love to have specific people like volunteers and compile a list of people who are interested in being mentors who we can point. We can either give you a Discord tag where you'll be notified when one of the grantees like has a question, and you can hold that tag so you can show up for them to help them answer questions, or someone managing cohort 0 can have a list of people who we can go to when a grantee like has questions about specific things. So if you're interested in being a mentor, maybe put your hand up in the community voice chat, and we'll give you a tag or put you on a list. And also if you're interested in the screening board. So yeah, anyway, it's gonna be a lot of fun. So looking forward to it.
Thank you, appreciate it. Yeah, so the grants will be cool. I've kind of said this from the start, but like, you know, obviously we are past like the honeymoon phase on this project. Like we saw a ton of engagement, you know, right after mint, which is kind of normal. And then you see kind of like a slow kind of decline in engagement, which is normal. I see it across the space. It's really just, I think it comes down to there's just so many like bright and shiny objects in the Web3 space on a daily basis that people have a hard time, you know, staying interested in specific things if they're not planning on like, you know, being engaging every single day. So I think really there's a lot of people that are holding DAO Punks that are, you know, maybe emotionally invested in DAO Punk success, but they don't have the time to like build alongside of us, which is fine. But really where I'm going with that is like, if you are one of the people that wants to build alongside us, you know, we are going to be making some meaningful moves here in the space. I mean, we've got a decent little treasury for kind of the amount of holders that we have. And, you know, we're planning on deploying all of that cash in a meaningful way. And so really, and I know this is kind of, it might sound corny, but it's true. Like theoretically, if we can change like one person's life and make a meaningful impact on the DAO space, like you never know how deep that impact can go. I mean, if we think back to like B.Pete's whole original idea for the DAO Punks grant program, he really had the idea because, you know, Vitalik Buterin, I think, received a Teal Fellowship Scholarship or a grant. And so, you know, the same kind of concept applies here. Like, you really never know who we are potentially helping to thrust into the DAO ecosystem or just the Web3 space in general. Like, it'd be kind of cool if we look back in 20 years from now and say, oh, look, you know, we know that person from cohort 0, and look, they're building like the next financial system of the world, stuff like that. And so really that's the level that I'm thinking about. You know, how do we get to deploying that capital as soon as possible so we can actually start seeing some, like, you know, we're basically creating meaning out in the DAO space. And so that is really the next step. With that said, we've really focused, we're trying to like micro focus now on the grants program. So a lot of the people that are here are pretty much the people that are showing up to all of the different group calls and stuff like that, like the grants and treasury and everything like that. I think on our last call, Hiro, we talked about how we're gonna basically postpone any talks about the treasury management system and everything like that until we get this grants program figured out. Is that correct?
That is correct. So backburn anything about treasury management and ratifying that stuff, or governance, and then put all of our efforts into grants.
Okay. Yeah. And I think really our mindset around that was like, you know, we still have some ways to go with the grants. We're almost there, but we need kind of one final push. So we're thinking about, instead of continuing conversations on other stuff, let's just focus on what is the most meaningful and what has the biggest impact to the space. And really that's the grants. And so once we get the grants underway and we get that stuff working, we can start conversations again about like treasury management framework and stuff like that, which I think would make more logical sense anyways. So we've also got some other cool stuff in the works right now. We actually met with Bo, who's in this call right now. We talked to him about this concept of like a DAO job board. And I don't know, Bo, if you're prepared or you want to talk anything about that, you can.
Yeah, sure. Voice check here. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right, cool. Appreciate you inviting me to chat about it briefly. I mean, things are pretty early. Really happy to talk and collect ideas from folks that want to contribute. But the idea is to sort of establish a way for DAOpunks to extend its relationship with some of the relationships it already has, major sort of DAOs and protocols that are out there that where we can service them with the work of Sinjun and CB and others, but also to extend that into the realm of sort of like, hey, look, if you're a DAOpunk, you're pretty committed to this space. You're probably part of the brain trust. You probably have some pretty sick relationships, and therefore you're probably a really good target for hire. And so can we extend the relationship out from, artistry and into, connections? That's the idea behind the work board. And so Elidane has stepped up as sort of my mentee. I think I'll do a bunch of sort of strategic like thinking here, and I mean that in a very lightweight sense. Like, I don't think this takes a hell of a lot of strategy work, but I don't think I'll be very heavily involved from a doing perspective, and more of just like, hey, I'd like to contribute to the idea. I'd like to get others involved and allow Elidane and others to jump in and build. It's super new. Really enjoyed the conversation last week with Hiro and CB and Sinjun to sort of like move that in the right direction. And wouldn't quite say we're off to the races, but definitely we have the green light to start building something out. So love that.
I appreciate it. Yeah, so we don't know what the exact job board would look like, or even what it's called. That's kind of like what its code name is right now. So you don't have to think like a literal job board or what you think a job board is nowadays, because that could change. But basically we're thinking around the concept of like, we have these relationships with DAOs. We have people who have relationships in this space as well. How can we leverage that to provide value back to our community and also use it as a tool to grow our community? And so really, if I think back to like kind of what my original vision of DAOpunks, what it could be, is really, I see it as being like kind of like a stopping, like a transitionatory kind of DAO, to where, you already know what a DAO is, you're interested in working in the DAO space, but you just don't really know how or where to make that happen. And so, I'd like to think that DAOpunks could be a place where people could come one day and say, come into the chat and say, hey, I'm looking to work in DAOs. And then there'd be a bunch of people in there that could either assist them or maybe, usher them in the right direction. And we're thinking that, some of these DAOs that we're working with, we kind of have mutual benefit here, to where they could help us kind of fulfill this role, and they'd be getting, obviously some value in return for that. And so it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, our original relationships with these DAOs right now is really a relationship on creating art and visuals, but we think it can extend so much further than that. So we're just trying to figure out what that means. And so if you guys have any cool ideas or anything like that, then we're going to be spinning up some channels here soon for like Elidane and Bo. So feel free to like jump in and join the conversations on that stuff. And what's cool about it too is, again, like, we're if you want to do something in this DAO, like it's really up to you. Like you can just take it and run with it. And we can put you in touch with some influential people over at these other DAOs. And you never know where that relationship could go. So it's definitely, if you're interested in working in the DAO space, there's definitely like nothing wrong with networking and meeting more people. And a lot of the DAOs we're working with are really rooted in like, they have staying power. These are not DAOs that are just like going to disappear overnight. So definitely worth getting to know these people. So let's see, that leads me also into, we are working on a podcast and a newsletter. I'm not intimately involved in either of those. I think Hiro might have a better update than I do.
Sure. CB, you're going strong, brother. Very well done this morning. Yeah, so I'll start with podcasts. That is in the works. We did our first kind of interview with Sinjun. It's Maddie Daddy and myself. That Sinjun was so excited. His mic was hot. He was trying to eat his microphone. So we're going to have to re-tape that one, which is okay. And we'll do that in the next couple of weeks for sure. But we have Feems in here who's, like by some grace of God, showed up in DAO Punks about the time that Matt and I were getting this dialed in, and she has a bunch of executive producing experience in podcasts. So she has agreed to kind of help us do this. She's been invaluable to date, and it's been super awesome. So I would expect to see some episodes dropping probably toward the end of March. We're going to record a couple back-to-back in the middle of March because we're traveling, or I'm traveling for a bit coming up tomorrow. But when we get back, we'll dial in our friend Sinjun's second interview, and then we're going to do one with Above Average Joe from Bankless, and then we have a handful of other guests kind of on the radar that we're going to tap to get in line. We're looking at doing it bi-weekly, and so we should have a couple per month going forward, and it's really exciting and super fun. So keep an eye out for that. You'll see pings later with sort of some help we may need in terms of putting together covers or different kind of marketing materials. Those are things we're going to pay in bank for. So, this kind of work is compensated, and keep an eye out, like I said, for that. With the newsletter, yeah, so that was an idea that we've had too for a couple months, and it sort of backburned a bit, to be honest. Just people got busy, things happen in real life, but we're bringing it back. And it might be actually better if Joey or Mina talk to that because they're more intimately involved. I'm not really heavily involved. Yesterday was my first real meeting for it. And I'm going to kind of help on the back end by doing some editing along with our friend Trewkat down there, who I think is still here. Maybe. Hi, Trewkat. But for the most part, Mina and Joe are leading the charge on this. Relevantly, maybe from a higher up perspective, we are going to compensate for this as well. And so we're feeling the real need within DAO Punks and just recognizing, issue in the ecosystem generally about, worker compensation. Like we got to pay for content, right? And at one point, I think that I certainly felt that there was enough, kind of vibe in the air where people were willing to contribute, thoughtful work for free. And I'm not saying that's not still true, but it's less true, I think, than it was a couple months ago, which is cool. So we're gonna do 0.05 ETH for an article, which is basically better than they pay over at Bankless for an article. And we're looking to have the first newsletter shipped toward the end of this month. And so that will also be bi-weekly, and generally consist of a couple of short articles and then some DAO related content. I would totally turn it over though to Mina or Joey if you guys care to flesh this out a little more.
Could, if Joey does not prefer to do it himself.
Go, Mina.
Okay. So what we would like to do and differentiate ourselves from other newsletters is to focus on culture, DAO culture, and the people of DAO. So we try to present a very humane, very raw. We like to refer to it the good, the bad, and the ugly. So we don't really try to present a generalized view of the DAO punks because that's our demeanor. We are not generalized. We're all individuals that have different views. So we're trying to be very liberal with our stance. So I think we're welcome to take any kind of topic related to culture, DAO culture, and the people of DAO, even if some people might not agree in the group with the topic. We're eager to support it because of the idea of freedom of speech and diversity. So currently we're still developing. Last meeting we kind of discussed of the first few releases being focused on having like shorter articles from different people. We talked about the idea of having each release someone by rotation responsible of curating, having a vault where people contribute, and each release someone could curate and choose what themes should be presented, and just showcase first of all the curator and the writers. And yeah, that's what we came up by now. If you want to know more, LifeFest was very kind to put his notes on the newsletter thread, and I also summarized and I put the main points of moving forward. Of course, as I said in my message, this is not set in stone. We are more than happy to encourage debate and discussion and novel ideas. So if you have anything you like to add or any idea you want to add to the newsletter, there's a lot of time. So yeah, we encourage anybody to show up, write articles, write as much as you like. It doesn't have to be perfect. We kind of agreed that in the beginning, most all of us were gonna provide feedback and write notes and make sure that we don't need at the moment a very strong editing team. So yeah, it's the time to get experimental with your thoughts. So please feel free to join our team and submit pieces, and yeah, have a discussion about them.
Super cool. Yeah, I'm excited about that stuff. And I kind of think it goes back to kind of 2 points I was talking about earlier. I mean, obviously the newsletter and the podcast can be very big revenue drivers in the future if they're done, if they're executed properly. And so that's another avenue that we could definitely like refill our treasury. I mean, if you look at like Bankless HQ, the Bankless HQ's whole business model is built off the backbone of monetizing podcasts and newsletters. And so, we can go down that model as well. And there's lots of DAOs out there that probably would be more than happy to basically effectively advertise with us in our blogs and in our newsletters and also in our podcasts. So once we get stuff like that spun up and we're moving at a good pace, we could definitely refill the treasury with some of those initiatives. And then also it kind of goes back to also like why I was saying the grants seem to be one of the most important things right now. Really, I think the grants program, as it's really our core kind of initiative with this DAO, it's also going to probably be our core feeder for content moving forward. I mean, all of the experiences and, like you said, the good, the bad, and the ugly, all of those things are going to rear their head during this grants program. And I think we really have an interesting perspective here because a lot of DAOs they're not really like going to be intimately involved in their daily workers' lives like potentially we are. And so we're going to have like a really cool perspective that we can share with the world. And so it kind of speaks to how important it is to get this grants program up and running and effectively, because once we do, it's going to feed the newsletter, it's going to feed the podcast, it's going to feed the blogs, it's going to feed everything. And so that's why it's probably the most important thing we're working on right now. And really that's probably a good place to end it, in my opinion, or at least end my portion of talking. So I don't know if people have any questions or anything I missed. So really the TLDR of all of this is the grant program is the most important thing that we're working on right now. So really that's where the most attention is heading right this moment. Once we get the grants program spun up and we get that working, then we can start to have fun in kind of a bunch of different sectors. But the grants program is probably the most important thing that we're all kind of working towards at this point. It's good because we have time to set up, the newsletter. We have time to set up the podcast, the job board, stuff like that. So Sinjun, Hiro, anybody got anything to say or?
Yeah, real quick, I'll just chime in. And maybe it's also an open question. I think one thing we were discussing yesterday regarding the newsletter is just at a point in the past weeks, and maybe it's a bit of burnout or just commitment to other things. The interaction, I think also in the DAO, but we saw it in the newsletter was really low. Like it became sort of like an echo chamber a bit. And I think it would be great and also contribute to the work we're trying to do with the newsletter, the podcast, the grants, and also just generating more interaction amongst ourselves. If we, besides the GMs to try and, live a note, check up on what's happening with the grants and governance and so on. I wonder what you guys think in terms of just trying to drum up some more interaction and participation in the DAO. I think that would help a lot in terms of where we're going, so that we're all on the same page as well and can hash out any differences of opinions or perspectives that we have.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's obvious that, yeah, like engagement has gone down, and I've seen engagement go down in other communities I'm a part of as well. I don't know if it has to do with, some of the price. I really noticed it actually after the price drawdown that we had. I started to see a lot of cracks in the wall kind of across the ecosystem. But I personally am leaning towards thinking that if we get the grants program up and running and it's meaningful, I think we're going to be able to get some more engagement, because I think people are that's going to be like a really big milestone for us. And so I think there's going to be a lot of people that are engaged by that. But I'm not sure if that's the case or not. I'm leaning towards that, though.
I think it's because we stopped giving out POAPs.
Yeah, the POAPs. Oh, goodness.
I have a question, actually, particularly in regards to the grant. I was wondering whether or not there would be an opportunity for individuals to submit a project proposal. The reason being is that, like, looking at the grant, I definitely understand its intention. But I also think that there could also be room for those that are kind of like self-starters, worked in DAOs, not like full-time, but can provide a project that can equitate to the funding that they would be available. So that's to say that, like, if I have a particular project in mind that I can actually achieve that aligns with DAO punks, and like in terms of the collaboration and partnership, like, is there an avenue to receive funding for me to materialize that, which wouldn't require a lot of labor from other people, if that makes any sense?
Yeah, so I've thought about that too. And somebody actually asked that question, or at least what I think you're asking, not long ago. And kind of what I told them was like, if you have a good idea or a good project, then like, just shoot your shot and pitch it to the community. And I think really like nothing's out the window. So like, I think if a good enough project approached DAO punks and said, hey, like, I know this isn't maybe what you guys are looking at doing, but if it just looks so good and like so revolutionary, then maybe everybody here is like, wait a second, maybe we should fund this. I think that that's definitely a potential. I think for this first grant round, I think we're focusing more towards the individual, but I get what you're saying too. And I've sort of thought like, when the market is doing really good, or at least my perspective of this last kind of really good time that was happening over the last year, we had a bunch of like individual people coming in, like quitting their jobs and working for DAOs. But then when we saw the downturn happen, really the short macro downturn, a lot of people were kind of stepping back, and they're like, hold on a second, like maybe I didn't make the right choice. And I think if we see like a really deep bear market, we might see a lot of people stepping back individually. And then that's really maybe where we have to shift focus from funding individual grants to funding, projects that are basically building through bear market. I'm not really sure. I personally, sorry.
What I meant is it's actually an individual project. So like I was looking at the grant application, and it is like based on like the individual and like really a heavy reliance on like mentorship. But like, what if like the one person is like, I would like to use the money to subsidize myself so that I can complete this task that meets and aligns with like DAO punks and this and this and this. Do you know what I mean? Because like, I feel like there are kind of two categories of people like that are in these DAO transitions. Like, I think ones that like really excel in DAOs are like ones who were already like self-starters in their real life, and then like kind of got into DAOs because they are able to have the freedom and agility to whether like build or dream or do the things, right? And so I just like looking at the grants and us talking about like sustainability, like if somebody had like an idea for like, oh, I want to do 8 AMAs, for example, and that's what I want to submit for my thing, and it will meet these KPIs. Like, is there an openness for that, or is it just more of like, we want to hold your hand for this experience and like you'll get like mentors? Like, I'm just still trying to understand the two frameworks of
Yeah.
grants, to be honest.
Yeah, these are actually like all the types of conversations that we have in these grant calls. And so maybe, so we don't go in the weeds too much on this, I mean, maybe you should come to one of these grant calls coming up here soon, and we can dive into it deeper. Because I think, Mike goes here too, and maybe he could talk better about it. But I think we've actually talked about these same things before. I'm on the personal, I think I'm leaning more towards what you're saying as well. Like, I want this grant program to be as inclusive as possible. Like, I don't want somebody to have like a really great idea, come in and start doing the application and think that they don't apply for whatever reason and then not follow through, right? Because maybe that person would absolutely be like a perfect candidate for us. Like, maybe they don't fit within like a specific mold, but sometimes those are the best opportunities, right? And so I agree with you. I don't know if Michael has anything else to add on top of that, but I would just suggest you come to one of the grant calls and we can dive into that a little bit deeper.
Oh, I was just going to say that I think the grant's really meant to help people go full-time DAO. So for some people, full-time DAO means working for other DAOs, but for other people, it means building your own tooling and building your own project. So I think that's totally within the framework of what we want to do. If somebody has their own project and they need funding and that's what helps them go full-time DAO, then for sure, 100% yes, and then it's also ultimately up to the DAO Punk community to vote on who wins the grants. And that's going to kind of define over time, like what the DAO Punk community actually wants from grantees. So we're trying to leave it like vague and open so that anybody will apply, and leave it up to the DAO Punk community to kind of decide who we actually want to give grants to.
Yeah, and I think that's another interesting thing too, because like, yeah, like the concept of, like you said, the concept of DAOs is different kind of on who you're talking to as well. And so I think we're going to see the concept of DAO just continually evolve over time. And it might even get to a place where, one day when we're talking about DAOs, we're like referencing back to like OG DAOs that like were back in the day, right? Versus like this new school DAO. And so I really think as we continue doing stuff, we always have to kind of like go back and self-analyze and say like, has the definition of DAOs changed? You know what I mean? Like, what does it mean to even be full-time in DAOs? And, and just look at like the individual level and just always be kind of reanalyzing, because the industry is changing as we go. Like, we're all writing history as we move forward. But
Hey,
really,
Bushi, can I jump in for a sec?
yeah.
Hey, guys, it's GarrotTheParrot. Just to address one other thing that you were asking, Feems, that, while we do want people to reach out at, the grantees, if they're struggling with a question or a topic or a specific task or whatever it is, I don't think our goal is to, enforce sort of like a hand-holding type thing. I think we want to be here for the people that need it. I think there are people that will probably be super individually driven that, excuse me, that may not really need or want much of our help at all. So I just didn't want to make you think like that was part of it. Like, you have to, be constantly engaging with, some sort of mentorship program.
Yeah, and I think some of the things we're talking about too, like I have some ideas for how we could fund future projects and maybe even turn that into another revenue driver back to the treasury, to kind of make the treasury more self-sustaining. And there's some cool models that some other DAOs are employing to like do that. So yeah, I think we're trying to make it as general as possible while also still make it manageable to where we can still go through applications and like narrow them down, right? But still encourage people to apply that have all sorts of different like cases. So then that's really where the conversations have all been around. It's like, how do we set this up into a structured, manageable structure, but also make it kind of make it all encompassing as well, which is tough. But I want to be respectful of everyone's time. So we are on the hour here. So I don't know if anybody has any other questions. I mean, I can hang out here for a little bit, but if you guys want to bounce off, I'll leave that up to you. I think we've talked about all the updates. I think moving forward, it would be cool and smart if we did maybe a monthly community call, and really with the intention of if any of you guys want to know what's going on and kind of get the whole month synthesized down to an hour or less, then really that would be a cool place to do it.
Yeah, and I think once we have a hard date where we're launching, cohort, opening the applications, when we have a hard date, we're opening the doors, I imagine we'll set up another community call as well.
Everybody, thanks for showing up. CB, awesome job. MCing, very nice. Thanks for contributions by everyone else who spoke and helped to fill everyone in about what we're doing here at DAO Punks. So pretty stoked after that. And let's go back and build away, my friends.
Thanks, guys. Ciao, ciao.
See ya.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Bye.
Thank you all. Have a beautiful day.
Much love.
Thanks, guys.
Ciao.
Thanks, everybody.
Ciao, ciao.
And was this recorded?